Hello, this is Ron Costner, the curator of the Conversations with Great Dead Writers Project, and welcome to our second interview. In an age of electronic miracles, we can now reach back over time and chat with the great personages of the past. And who would be more interesting to interview than Moses, a man who talked with God Almighty and put into operation the Lord's plan to create a great people and a holy nation. Born to Hebrews, a people enslaved in Egypt for centuries, Moses was raised in the household of Egypt's Pharaoh. Observing a taskmaster beating a slave, he slew the Egyptian and was banished. Wandering the desert, he came upon a beautiful Midianite, married her, and raised his family in the household of Jethro, until the Lord chose him to lead the Hebrew people out of Egypt and into the Promised Land. Several films have depicted this story, but Hollywood Moses have little in common with the real person, a man of deep intelligence and wit. Tonight, it is our great pleasure to present to you our conversation with Moses, a man who lived between heaven and earth and took upon himself the burden of politics and history, delivering not only the Lord's commandments, but astonishing lessons in statecraft that continue to challenge us today. I'm delighted to be face to face with Moses, the great liberator of the Jewish people, author of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, a man who talked with God.
Thank you, but you attribute to me what belongs to God alone. I was imperfect. I don't even know who my parents were. Likely, I was born a Hebrew. I was raised in Pharaoh's household, grew up an undisciplined playboy, enjoying my accidental royalty. And then, in anger, I killed a man, was banished.
It is strange to think of you as a person with thoughts.
It's all right there in Exodus. I was easily frustrated. In my youth, life was easy. Later, when God called on me to serve him, I was impatient, overwhelmed by what he asked me to do. I lacked experience, lacked intelligence, and at times, to be truthful, I wavered in my faith.
But this doesn't sound like the Moses I've read and heard about.
Look, I beat a man to death and ran away into the wilderness. Does that sound heroic to you? There I met my beloved Zipporah, married her, retreated to a shepherd's life. When the Lord awakened me from my slumber to be his champion, I tried all that I was worth to convince him I was weak, an insignificant person. How poor a speaker I was. I needed my brother Aaron's help even to speak to Pharaoh, along with some shabby magic tricks, sticks and snakes and so forth. Later in the desert, I all but gave in to my people's complaints. In the end, for my faults, it's all right there in Exodus, God denied me entrance to the Promised Land. He demands so much.
But Moses, I see you heroic with your staff upraised, parting the Red Sea.
You're thinking of Charlton Heston. Exodus describes a person's liberation, but it is also my story of how I grew into my destiny. My life was difficult, my heroism imperfect. You claim I wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, but where and when could I have written them? There in the Sinai? Written those stories that include my death and events even after I was dead. Please, praise instead the clever scribes in Babylon who collected the folk tales centuries after my time.
Well, for what then can you take credit?
Well, while I did kill an Egyptian, it was beating a poor slave. My sense of justice drove me to it. Injustice infuriates me. I'm passionate, ready to act against evil. Would a liberator be anything else? Though slow of speech, I spoke up to Pharaoh and hardened his evil heart against my people, just as God required, though I trembled and begged God to find another to serve him when it counted. I carried out his commands.
But overcoming fears shows a greater fortitude on your part.
Yes, that's true. But a passionate man makes mistakes, wanders into wrong paths, arriving only late in life at his best self. That's my Exodus story. I was angry, sometimes confused, but always wholehearted. Hunger for life showed me the way. When I met Zipporah beside the desert well, I followed my heart into her clan, a free people living simply. Jethro, my father-in-law, taught me to lead an honorable life based upon family affection. Lessons I could not have learned from the haughty Egyptians or the disheartened Israelites. Even now, I feel Zipporah in my arms, her dark eyes aglow, her heart swelling with desire. These affections attached me to the glory of creation and to God's endless blessings.
And yet you left all that when God appeared to you in the burning bush.
I was stunned. Who wouldn't be? A burning bush, God speaking to you directly.
You boldly asked him his name.
Listen closely, and you'll hear uncertainty in my brash words. In thunderous voice, he answered me when I questioned his name, I am that I am. Some thinks this response is mockery, something like, for me to know and you to find out. But what he was really saying was, I am what is, the bedrock of reality, whatever is truthful, enduring, and feeds life at its roots. Leaving my beloved wife and children, my father-in-law's wise counsel, all that could only be at the beckoning of ultimate reality.
Oh, and how resolute you were. You're associated with death and slaughter, including the killing of Egypt's firstborn.
And this offends you. Does your world get on without bloodletting? Tell me what when your nation hasn't armies in the field slaughtering enemies, tell the story without blood and suffering of the founding of your nation. History is a cluttered and winding path, ultimately towards peace and human dignity.
Oh, but still, all those children slaughtered by God's angel of death.
Now, a terrible cost to be sure, but unavoidable. If only Pharaoh had been a more sensible tyrant. But tyrants never are, and people caught in their grip, they pay a terrible price.
Well, let me speak freely, more frankly. God's regime is far from liberal and free.
Yes, I've heard these arguments against God. He lays down laws, 613 of them, and threatens to exterminate all who disobey. At Mount Sinai, God's presence so terrifies the people, they cover their ears in horror. Here's the account in Exodus chapter 19, and I read, and it came to pass on the third day in the morning that there were thunders and lightnings and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people in the camp trembled. And Moses brought forth the people out of the camp to meet with God, and they stood at the nether part of the mount. And Mount Sinai was altogether enveloped in smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire. And the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. How well I remember it. Yahweh warns him that he is a jealous God and demands tiresome rituals. In this view, God seems indeed the ultimate tyrant, unyielding and greedy for power.
Exactly.
But we need to understand how God operates. Recall, the Hebrews had lived in Egypt 430 years. They'd become accustomed to being slaves, and slavery does terrible things to people. The Jews, they worked, they ate, they mated, just like animals. They lost all memory of themselves as a nation, a people blessed with the sacred covenants God had made with their ancestors.
But you would think the Israelites would have embraced their liberty.
Oh, and you would be wrong. A slave follows his appetites. He prefers Egyptian flesh pots to the hard road to freedom. The slave does his work carelessly. He complains of his helplessness. He prefers grumbling to action. He lives in the moment without past ideals or dreams of a future.
Oh, sounds uncomfortably like people I know. And on bad days, myself.
Look, without God, without what is and must be so, we are enslaved to lives unworthy of us. We lose our way, the path where God leads us.
But how grim all this is. Where's the fun? God gave us bodies to savor delicacies, to dance, to create heavenly music, to embrace in passion, to enjoy good fellowship, and sometimes to rest and do nothing at all.
If only we could keep this playfulness in some perspective. But these delights often lead to destruction, as the Israelites demonstrated on their journey to the promised land.
But why judge them so harshly? I mean, in Sinai's desert, they were hungry and thirsty, fearful, lost, not knowing where they were or whether they would even survive.
True enough, but the Almighty was by their side, answering every need. Recall the miracles, parting the Red Sea, drowning Pharaoh's legions, providing pillars of cloud by day and fire by night, bringing water from rocks, raining manna from heaven. Wouldn't these prove God's fatherly care? Wouldn't they cause you to believe? And still, they whined and complained day to day, forgetting what God had done for them.
But they were wandering in a hostile desert, fearful and hungry. This hardly seems a fair test for human nature.
This was not a test. God isn't petty. He doesn't play games. His purpose was nothing less than to move humanity forward by establishing once and for all a holy nation, an example for all nations, to show what following God's law could achieve. The chosen people would show God's power to all the world, as he explained to me, as recorded in Exodus 19. You have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings and brought you unto myself. Now, therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a special treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation.
Well, what else should we know about God? In Exodus, God seems always to be angry and threatening, jealous, even intemperate.
Such nonsense. Think about it. Yahweh, a jealous God? Of whom would he be jealous? Of other gods? That motley collection of hallucinations? How would God be diminished when ignorant people worship a fish or a bull, or nowadays a rock star, an estate in the Hamptons or at Big Sur, a luxury sports car?
And yet God often appears enraged, ready to punish the Israelites for their ingratitude. God even boasts of his anger and of terrible punishments for those who disobey.
True enough, he presented himself to them as a betrayed lover, hungry for vengeance, an angry father, threatening his children, a brutal taskmaster. It's right there in Exodus 20. Let's read it. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of fathers upon their children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. These are threatening words, but consider, to whom is he speaking? And how could he make himself be listened to? Perhaps we prefer a calm, celestial reasoner. But in Exodus, God is speaking to a low-minded rabble, accustomed to obeying the man who holds the whip. Tell me, how would you have spoken to them? What disguises do your leaders wear to address their people? What success awaits leaders who speak to them simple truths, explaining patiently? God Almighty, he's a rhetorician. He adapts himself to his audience. He addressed his creatures harshly for their good, not for his glory. God doesn't need our approval. God doesn't need to be loved.
Yeah, but then, and still, God's 10 commandments put him first. Why doesn't thou shalt not kill, for instance, come first, instead of our need to obey him? It certainly seems that God's authority eclipses all else, and that your style of leadership defies democracy.
Democracy? Democratic principles provide such a weak foundation. The events of Mount Sinai show this. God asked the Israelites to enter into a contract with him. He would make them a holy nation and bear them on eagle's wings if only they obeyed his laws. He promised them perfection if only they agreed to do, well, merely what was best for themselves. And as with Eden's garden, humankind goes ahead and betrays God's trust. The Israelites agree to have no other gods, but first chance they get, they break their promise and nearly destroy themselves.
Remind me now, how did that happen?
While I was ascending Mount Sinai to meet with God, I left my brother Aaron in charge. Their president, you might say. They came to Aaron demanding a golden calf. And what did this politician do? He let them revel around this fertility god. They danced, they sang, got drunk, fornicated. They abandoned God, the only reality that matters. God, whose laws would lead them to holiness, self-respect, and national honor. But Aaron, my esteemed brother, he's a democratic leader. His wisdom, give the people what they want, so they will like you and rally around you. Democracy and slavery, are they opposite? Are they sometimes the very same thing?
But suppose we follow the lessons necessary for a holy nation. Wouldn't we need at some point democracy to emerge from enslavement to the appetites and to false leaders?
If only we weren't sunk in sin. Enlightenment philosophers could imagine otherwise, but look around you. What do you see? Greed and hatred, contempt for reason, for God's creation, for fellow feeling. In some essential ways, we wander still in a desert of deep confusion.
But still, I can't get past the harshness of your actions. You started a civil war and thousands perished. Why punish your people for following natural desires?
Natural desires, natural desires, all would have been lost that way. The people doing as they pleased, while the brutal desert and their enemies destroyed them.
Okay, then, but something else puzzles me. God looks down and sees them dancing around the golden calf and decides to kill them all. But you, a mere mortal, calm his wrath. You remind God of his covenant and then offer him a lesson in politics. It's here, right in Exodus. And the Lord said unto Moses, I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stiff-necked people. Now, therefore, let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, and that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. And Moses, you besought the Lord his God and said, Lord, why doth thy wrath wax hot against thy people, which thou hast brought forth out of the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand? Look here, God, you go on to explain to him, destroying the Israelites will frighten other nations and defeat your plan of reclaiming humankind. Did God need you to explain political reality?
A good question. But I ask you, think beyond the words. God does not forget his commitments. He needs no lessons from me. God maneuvered me into taking command in order to prove to me that I could. Recall, Exodus is the story of creating a nation, but also of shaping a leader. At the start, I was unworthy, but God made me understand what history requires of me. God forced me to accept my responsibility for this wayward people. Once I herded sheep, and now I was the shepherd of my people, enforcing God's law with threats of punishment and with guile, the rod and staff of the 23rd Psalm.
Okay, so you descended Mount Sinai, embarrassed Aaron for his weakness, and proposed the ghastly choice to the people.
To be precise, I required the faithful to go forth among the people and slaughter those who refuse to honor the covenant, to slaughter brothers, wives, fathers, and sons. Thousands died that day.
You imposed God's deadly law upon them.
It's more complicated. Read closely. I told the people God had ordered me to tell them to kill family members and neighbors, when in fact, he had not. The hard truth is, God left it for me to do. When Machiavelli, that great political scientist, praised the politically able representatives of God, whom he called the armed prophets, he mentioned me first and in particular.
I'm shocked. How can you justify this great lie and thousands of deaths?
Think. God didn't have to do anything to destroy these people. Without discipline and obedience, this rabble, wandering a brutal desert and surrounded by enemy nations, they would certainly have perished. Cleansing the community of the weak and troublesome avoided destroying the entire Jewish nation forever. With that brutal internal war, I preserved an opportunity to place not only the Israelites, but all humanity on the right path. The survival of humankind required it.
I am shocked.
Shocked, are you? Regard your own tortured history. President Lincoln, like me, a liberator, also had his political moment with God. He chose to do what I did, and with far greater slaughter. And where would your nation be and the world that depends upon your nation for a model of righteousness, if Lincoln had chosen instead to preserve peace at all cost.
Okay. I have one final question. Exodus is a mix of adventures, miracles, and wonders, and long passages so tedious you could lose your mind reading them.
You refer, no doubt, to painfully precise details for the construction of the tabernacle that Yahweh demanded his people construct for him. Just to recall how very tedious this is, here is a taste of it in the words of Exodus chapter 26. Moreover, thou shalt make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet. With cherubims of cunning work shalt thou make them. The length of one curtain shall be 28 cubits, and the breadth of one curtain 4 cubits, and every one of the curtains shall have one measure. The 5 curtains shall be coupled together one to another. The other 5 curtains shall be coupled one to another. And thou shalt make loops of blue upon the edge of the one curtain from the selvage in the coupling. And likewise shalt thou make in the uttermost edge of another curtain in the coupling of the second. 50 loops shalt thou make in the one curtain, and 50 loops shalt thou make in the edge of the curtain that is in the coupling of the second, that the loops may take hold one of another. And thou shalt make 50 taches of gold, and couple the curtains together with the taches. And it shall be one tabernacle. And on it goes like this for 35 more detailed verses, and continuing in this exacting manner from Exodus 26 through 4 additional chapters of approximately 40 mind-numbing verses each. And to burden the reader even more, these same instructions are repeated at Exodus 36 to 40, as if you weren't sufficiently bored the first time. But look how clever the Bible is. Can we understand why God made these demands in this utterly tiresome way? Let me explain. Exodus asks both the Israelites and the Bible readers to stay awake and attend to details. Serving God requires hard work, precision, and great care. Making the specifications so precise and the telling of them so exhausting reminds us, as careless as our ancestors were, of the close attention God requires of us. These specifications are not about what God needs. God needs nothing for himself. It's we who need to learn precision and determination. Serving history requires attention to detail, things done right, humans working at the finest level of their capability. Without that, we are lost to inner turmoil, to nature's challenge and the brutality of one another. Good work done with care, as if God himself had to be pleased with the result. That is the grounding of human dignity.
Wow, our discussion has caused me to think about things I thought I understood, but maybe I don't. How to thank you.
As in all things, thank God.